is Chris Cave, and also joining me is Arish. And let me get started here.
Hi, yes, my name is Arish Rojas. I am in charge of the North America and Latin America for AVEVA and Schneider Electric. Today we'll talk about WIN-911 AVEVA system platform, integration demonstration, and best practices. So, Chris, go ahead and take it away.
Alrighty. So we are going to start with our agenda. We're going to talk about prerequisites, configuration workflow, bringing in tabs, or bringing in subscriptions and alarms, and then also we're going to talk about some new features. So where to install WIN-911? This part's pretty simple. You always want to install on one of the system platform, WIN platform, I guess you could call it the app platforms, or anywhere that you have a Galaxy or a deployed machine on the Galaxy, and you would want to install WIN-911 on that machine. And what's required is just one WIN-911 license that'll come with a direct connect to your system platform, and also an OPCDA connection if you choose. And here are some prerequisites. So you do need an MX access license, and we do have the 2017 one available, and also the 2012 and 2014. Currently, I don't think we have the 2021 yet, so you may need to contact Wonderware for that one, but we'll work on getting our own and putting it into a KB, and eventually you'll be able to get it from us if you want. Now, as far as security, when you go to install WIN-911, the best way to do it is to create a either local user or domain user, put it into the local admin group of that machine, and then of course you don't want to change that password. However, we did include a account utility change where you can now change the username if you like. You can change the password, but before you do that, you would have to add the user to SQL as a sysadmin. Once the user's in SQL, then you can change it using the account utility, and I'll show you that later. And yes, WIN-911 does work with the alarm toolkit. It is required on your WIN platform as the in-touch provider, and we'll be showing you how to do that here in a minute. And so when you're looking at your system platform machine, I usually go to the deployment tab, and the platform here is the WIN platform. You can double click on that, and there's where you can add or enable the option to become a in-touch provider. And here is the next screenshot that will show that. So when you open that, you don't want to open up in read-only mode. You want to be able to edit it. So you would check that box, and once you do that, you redeploy and you're good to go. And then also note that if you have this box checked for register using Galaxy_Galaxy name instead of Galaxy, then you'll have to make this, you'll have to check this as well in the WIN-911 workspace. And this would be under the alarming system platform. When you go to create your connection, you'll see both this option to be able to check it. All right, so how to bring in the alarms. You cannot do a direct import of tags. You have to actually use subscriptions, and subscriptions, I think, are like queries to say, okay, give me a range of object names, or give me specific object names, or filter on certain object names or part of the name. You can also do it by priority. And here are our options here. So we can do an area, wildcard for all. This is our default all alarms. We can do specific object names or attributes. And then we can also do by priorities. And to get to that section, again, you would open up the WIN-911 workspace from the start menu, and you would navigate to the alarming, down the system platform, and to the subscriptions. Now, when you create a subscription, this is just making subscriptions available. They're not technically in use until you add it to a route. And I'll show you that here in a second. So now we're going to talk about creating the connection. And here's where you have the option to put in your Galaxy name, and then if that box was checked back on your system platform for the Galaxy Syntax, you would check that box there. And then to bring in the alarms, we need to have areas set up. So a lot of times people will put the parent area in this section and then use the subscriptions to bring in certain objects under that area. Or you can bring in other child areas as well through subscription routes. But the parent area would have to be set into this connection details first. Okay, so now a bit more about subscription routes. And so this is where you'd already have had created your subscriptions to bring in what alarms you want. You're using your filters. Once you've saved that, then it becomes available in the drop-down list when you go to the alarming system platform, galaxies, and then subscription routes. You would need to edit the page, which is down at the bottom right. You'll see our save disk. When it's not saved, or when it's already saved, normally you'd see a pencil icon. Click the pencil to edit, make a change, and then select to save it using the disk. Now the way these routes work is they go based on rank. So if the alarm comes in and it matches the very first filter, first route, then it's always going to use that strategy. And in the WIN-911 world, an alarm would trigger a strategy, which is more like the policies. Which call out list do you want to contact? Do you want to be able to stop the strategy when the alarm's acknowledged? And if you want to re-notify, you can also automatically acknowledge the alarm if the alarm would go to inactive. But on the left side is where you'd have your drop down. So any routes or subscriptions I would create would be available there. And then on the right is where I point it to a strategy. Now, one thing we do recommend, at least in the beginning, is if you're using certain filters and you're trying to bring in certain alarms, then you would make that as your rank 1, your custom one. And then at the bottom of your routes, create a subscription for all alarms and point it to the do not notify strategy. That way it can help troubleshoot just to make sure that your filter's working. And if the alarm were to catch the do not notify, then you know that there's something wrong with the filter, and it'll help you troubleshoot that situation. All right, and so here are some places where we can go and get our knowledge base articles, our documentation. It's on our website. You just go to win911.com. And over at the top right, we have 2 tabs that are very useful. One is resources and the other one is support. And I often just use the support one because both kind of take you to the same spot. So I usually just hover the mouse over the support tab, let that drop down appear, and then from there you can go to our documentations, our knowledge base, and our how-to videos. And we have all kinds of videos that show you how to do basic tactics and strategies, bringing in alarms. We have the installation checklist, which is pretty comprehensive, useful as a guideline for installing a new system. And these are some items we're working on coming up in the future. We're working on a Core 5, which is going to be more of a desktop app, and no longer will need a web server. You will no longer need IIS. Again, you will have to open up the workspace in Internet Explorer, which will be nice. So you don't have to worry about Silverlight. And with the desktop app, it's pretty neat. You'll be able to pick and choose who can log into the app, and then you can even customize what users can see in the app. So it's going to make it much easier for security, and you can install it on any machine, and it'll be able to access the WIN-911 server, which will be very nice as well. One of the new features we're going to be adding to it is a way of sharing a phone. So you could have one on-call phone with multiple people listed for that phone, each with their own authorization code, and they'll be able to pass that phone back and forth without having to worry about creating multiple connections anymore. So it should be nice. Then we're going to work on automatic failover to the backup. This will be a hot backup situation. And we're trying to reduce the need for you to use scripting in your SCADA, and we're going to be able to do that automatically without the need for scripting. And then coming up is we're going to be adding support for OPC UA alarms and conditions. We'll still support OPC DA as well, but it looks like everyone's transitioning to UA, so we're going to be working on that in the future. And you're always welcome to go to our website And up at the top, there is a submit feature request. You can create a way of asking for things that you might want to see in our product in the future, and we love to hear from you. We really appreciate that. All right, so we're going to get into some best practices here. And here's again some links to get to those KB articles and other things you might need to help get you started. Okay. Before I move into this, so some best practices. I'm going to go ahead and share my demo, my system here, and just move that over. Give me just a minute. And so when we start with WIN-911, when we create WIN-911, the best option is to always go from left to right. And I'm sorry, bear with me just a minute. Sorry, just 1 minute here, having a little bit of technical difficulty. There we go. All right. And so when we
right now we're actually going to be doing a full demo of the software, right? You are actually going to be showing our customers and clients and SIs a little bit of like kind of inside of WIN-911 and some of the best practices using the actual software, correct?
That's right. Yes, sir.
Excellent.
And so we do launch Workspace from the Start menu, and we would launch it from Workspace. It would also add a WIN-911 folder, so you can always access it from here if you'd like. And we have Workspace down here. This will open up Internet Explorer to our Workspace app. And best practice is to work from left to right. You want to first create your contacts, go to your gateways, and then create your gateway connections. In this example, I'm using a Gmail account connecting to the SMTP server for Gmail. So this is my email connection. I do not have a voice, but if you wanted to set up a voice connection to our Grandstream, you can do that, or use a TAPI modem. And then if you were to have an SMS modem, you would set that up as well. Hit our plus sign, and you can connect to an SMS modem, either serial, Telnet, or UDP. And then mobile is our newest notifier. It's probably my favorite notifier, very easy to set up. We actually provide you with a username, a temporary password, and once you have that, you can create your own password for the gateway account, and that will be your connection to Microsoft. Once you have your gateway set up, then you want to create your connections. So it's still the same format. We go to contacts and then connections, and then you choose which connections you want for each notifier. And a user can be in all four if they want. So here I have my email address. I don't have voice or SMS set up, but I could be in those as well. And then I also have my mobile account, which is still using my same email address. But in this case, it's actually going through Microsoft. Once you have your connection set up, and also, sorry, I forgot to mention, you always want to make sure that they are enabled to acknowledge when you create their connection. And then you can always set up alarm requests or go to utilizers to see which tactic, which callout list they're a part of. But by default, when you create a connection, usually the act option is disabled. So if you want them to be able to acknowledge alarms, you'll want to make sure to go into the options tab and allow that acknowledgement. Same is true for email. If I were to go look at my email connection, we have an act options tab, and in this case, I have it to act on any reply. And what that means is when I receive an email, I can just simply reply to that email. I don't have to type a thing, just hit reply, hit send, and it will acknowledge that alarm for me. Each connection will show utilizers, so this is important. If you want to actually delete a user, you got to make sure they're not utilizing any tactics. And so in this case, I could freely delete this user if I wanted because he's not part of any tactics. This user and the rest of my users are actually part of a tactic, so I would need to go into that tactic and remove them first before I could delete them. And that will lead me to my next part. So after we've created our contacts, our gateways, Now we can get into our notifications section. And we want to create a callout list, a tactic, before we create a strategy. And so in this situation, I'm going to go to tactics, basic. And right now I just have two basic tactics. I have my email, and this is a good example of an email escalation that you can use. I'm just going to start from the top and go down the list here. So the name is a friendly name, it can be whatever you want. A description, again, you're choosing a friendly description. The delay before notification means when the alarm is triggered, we will receive it in Log Viewer, but you may want it to delay for 5 minutes before actually sending out a notification. Maybe you want to give the alarm time to go inactive first before notifying anyone. So you can always change this setting here if you'd like. And then the repeats is based on how often this list is going to repeat itself. And so when it comes to when the callouts stop or when the notifications stop, that is based on the strategy stop condition, which I'll show you here in just a minute. But right now, let's just assume we have a scenario where an alarm is triggered. It has not been acknowledged yet. And so it will start the email notifications. And in this scenario, I have no delays after until the very end. So what that means is that every user here gets an email notification. And when it reaches the end, we now have a 30-minute delay. This will give people time, one of the operators, to acknowledge the alarm. If no one has acknowledged the alarm within 30 minutes, then we're going to repeat the list and email everyone again, re-notify them again. And again, if no one's acknowledged the alarm by this point, then it'll kick in the delay after, and after 30 minutes, it'll continue to notify everyone. And we'll do this up to 4 times. So that should be plenty of time for at least someone to acknowledge the alarm. And at any point, if one of these operators do acknowledge the alarm, it will stop the strategy based on my stop condition, and that will stop the notifications. Now getting into the actual list, if we were to edit the list, we hit our pencil down at the bottom. From here, I can change the order around. I can select just one user if I wanted to. And this box here is, when you select it, it's only for editing purposes. It doesn't mean that they're part of the callout list or not. I mean, if they're in here and they're on schedule, they'll receive a notification. And so in editing mode, we would check the box that we want. We can use the arrows here to move around the list if we want. I can put them to the bottom, back to the top. And then our retries, these only kick in when there's a failure. It doesn't mean that it's going to email him and then retry and email them one more time, especially if the notification was successful. However, if the notification failed for whatever reason, then it would wait 30 seconds and try to email them again. And if it still failed, then it's going to move on to the next person. You can also highlight 2 boxes if you want. So I could move both 1 and 2 at the same time, move them down to the bottom of the list if I wanted, or put them back out to the top. And again, with the delay after, I could always add more delays if I wanted to. Maybe I just want operator 1 to try to acknowledge the alarm first. I'll give him 15 minutes. And if he hasn't acknowledged the alarm, then it will move on to emailing operators 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then again, we'll wait 30 minutes in this situation. Now, one of the things you can do in the strategy is set up a re-notify on state change. And what could happen there is everyone gets an email, especially if I have no delay afters. Everyone would receive an email. If the alarm were to go inactive, then everyone would get a re-notify on state change for that, let them know that the alarm is now inactive and unacknowledged. But it still needs to meet the stop condition for the strategy. So at some point, someone still needs to acknowledge that alarm before it stops sending people notifications. I'm going to go ahead and save that. So once we have our tactic created, now we can create our strategy and assign our tactic to the strategy. And so in this scenario, I have a mobile strategy, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit my pencil down here and edit. Okay, and so I selected my tactic based on the radio button here. I know it's easy to want to click this one up here since it actually says tactics, but this will just navigate you back to the tactic tab that we were just on. So it's not needed here unless you're trying to get back to tactics and maybe you want to create a different tactic. So when we want to actually select a tactic, a callout list, we would hit our ellipsis button here, and this will give me all the available options of tactics I've created. And so this is why we work from left to right. It's why we create the gateway first, and then we create the connection for that gateway, the user, and then we would create the callout list of tactic. And then finally, we create the strategy so we can assign that tactic to a strategy. Now, I was talking earlier about these stop conditions, and this is again is what stops the callout list. The default is when the alarm becomes terminal, and what that means in the SCADA world is an alarm that has reached this life cycle that is inactive and acknowledged. And so when we think or talk about alarm life cycles, every alarm comes in as active unacknowledged, and it starts its life cycle. Typically, two things can happen at that point. Either the alarm becomes acknowledged or it becomes inactive. And so either way, it would change a state to either active, acknowledged, or it would become inactive, unacknowledged. And that still hasn't completed its life cycle yet. In order to complete a life cycle, the alarm has to be inactive, acknowledged, and that's what we call a terminal alarm. So you could have a situation where the alarm is active, unacknowledged, goes inactive, unacknowledged, goes active again, still unacknowledged. It's still part of that same life cycle idea. It's just one alarm, one life cycle, changing states in that scenario. However, let's say the alarm does come in as active, unacknowledged. An operator acknowledges that alarm, so it changes states to active, acknowledged. And at some point, if it were to go active again, it's still, again, if it were to go inactive, then at that point, it's completed its life cycle. It's become an inactive, acknowledged alarm. It completes itself. You would no longer see it in log viewer. And typically your SCADA alarm summary screen makes it disappear as well. And if that alarm were to trigger again within the next minute, 5 minutes or whatever, it becomes a new alarm with a new life cycle and it repeats the process. So in a perfect world, you typically want an alarm to come in as active, unacknowledged. WIN-911 receives that, sends out the notification to your operators, to your users, and at some point, one of them acknowledges the alarm, says, okay, yep, I acknowledge it, and I'm heading on site to go fix that issue. They clear the issue, it becomes inactive, acknowledged, and now it's considered a terminal alarm. So again, this is what controls the tactic. So in the scenario where it's emailing the users, this would keep emailing even if someone acknowledged. So maybe you don't want to do that, especially in a voice connection situation where it's calling people. The first person on the call list acknowledges the alarm. Well, in this stop condition, it would still keep calling people because it hasn't met its stop condition yet, because it's waiting to become inactive and acknowledged. And so we can always change that. We have a few options here, either using inactive, unspecified. I would say the most two common ones I see are when the alarm becomes acknowledged and when it becomes terminal. I'd say 9 times out of 10, most people prefer this one because this would actually stop the notifications being sent out. This would stop the calls. It would stop the whole notification, even if the alarm's still active. And so in the call flow situation, maybe you have 5 people on your call list. It calls the first person. They acknowledge the alarm. It's no longer going to keep calling the rest of the people at that point because it's met its stop condition. And so the strategy stop also in turn stops the tactic. A couple other options we have here. So this is your typical default, I would say a default basic strategy. And we can have the re-notify on state change enabled, which is actually required for mobile, not so much for the emails and SMS. And even in voice situation, if we had this checked, we can still suppress those voice notifications up here. Or you can choose not to if you want, but I'd say probably 10 out of 10 times most people want to suppress that stuff. And so in a scenario where maybe I'm doing email instead of mobile, then what would happen is the alarm would be triggered. It would send everyone an email. If the state were to change, it would send everyone an email if that state change. And maybe the people might not want spam. Maybe they don't want to be notified. They just want the initial event. So you could always uncheck that option. And that way it just sends the email and it won't send any follow-ups. So if someone acknowledges it, it's not going to let anyone know. If someone clears the alarm, it's not going to bug anyone about that either. Another good option here is automatically returning to normal to acknowledge the alarm. So that way you could have an alarm come in, maybe it goes inactive before it even starts a call out list. And so you could have it automatically acknowledge that, complete its life cycle, and no notifications would be sent out in that situation. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save what I have. And now, once I have my contacts, my tactics, my strategies all set, this is where I can start going to bring in my alarms. And so if we go down to the subscriptions, we can first create, trying to get rid of that. So we can create our first subscription if we like. We can bring in specific areas if we choose, or specific objects, or priority ranges. And I'd say probably the most common is either areas. Maybe they're looking for just specific objects. And probably the other most common is by priority. So you could always do a specific one, or set a range if you like. And in this situation, I've created one already. I've got my range alarm here, and I told it just to bring in priority range between 2 and 300. But for now, for this demo, I'm going to use our default, our all alarm. It's built in, basically saying give me all alarms. And now, once I have a subscription set, we can go to our Galaxy, our subscription route, and we can set our routes. And so right now, my top one is my all alarms going to my mobile strategy. If I was doing the troubleshooting, like I mentioned earlier, maybe I'm trying to just bring in alarms from a certain range. So I would put it here, set this to my actual email strategy, and perhaps I'm troubleshooting and I'll have all alarms come in and point to the do not notify strategy. And so in this scenario, when the alarm does come in the WIN-911, it will first check this route, rank 1. If it matches this filter based on the priority range, then it will use this strategy. If the alarm does not meet that filter, it'll move on to the next rank and use my all alarms, and then move to the do not notify. So I'm going to go down and cancel out of that. And we're going to backtrack just a little bit here, go back to the connection details. And again, this is where I usually put the parent area here. You don't necessarily have to do that. Maybe you only have one area where you really want alarms, so you would want to add the area here first. And then perhaps once you add the parent area in, you could use a subscription route to only bring in the child areas under that. So you're not bringing in the entire area if you'd like. So it gives you a lot of flexibility there for which alarms you want to bring in, which I thought was pretty neat. And I'm going to cover watchdogs and heartbeats real quick. The watchdog is a scenario where WIN-911 will monitor a tag for a change in value. And it's not so much a value, I'd say it's more like a state change. And what we're monitoring is for that tag to basically go active, inactive, active, inactive. And as long as we keep seeing that state change within 90 seconds, then we assume everything's great with the SCADA. If the alarm stopped changing states after 90 seconds, then we would send out a notification based on your strategy that you chose, which would in turn go out based on the tactic that was assigned to that strategy. So in the WIN-911 world, probably the easiest thing for me to remember that helps me troubleshoot this is alarm always triggers a strategy, and a strategy always triggers a tactic. And a strategy is really just, what do you want to do when it's acknowledged? Do you want to re-notify, things of that nature? And then the tactic is considered the call out list. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this. Now, heartbeats is the reverse order of monitoring. This is where WIN-911 will write to a tag and increment the value of that tag. And if the writes were to stop, then you can assume that something might be wrong with WIN-911 at that point. And typically what people will do is on their HMI, they might have a section where it's showing that heartbeat count. And if the heartbeat count were to stop after 1 minute, no update after 1 minute, perhaps it flashes and lets you know that there possibly could be an issue with WIN-911. And if there is an issue with WIN-911, that means no notification, so we can't send out a notification in that situation. So you really have to monitor that from your HMI. All right, I was going to backtrack just a little bit and show you a bit about advanced now. So advanced tactics, advanced strategies, I think are best used with roles and labels. And so let's just go back. And this is probably the best example I can show you. There's a lot of other ways you can use it, but I think that probably the best way is with the roles and labels. And so roles are a way of grouping users together. And we have a couple of defaults, but you could always create your own if you wanted to. And we could just say custom, and you could create a color. And then once you have it set, it becomes available as a selection. And so to group your users together, we would go back to our contacts, our connections. And in this case, I'm going to show you an example from the email users. So I have each of these operators in the roles for operators. They're all in part of the same role. And then the way we could use that is with a notify all to that role through an advanced tactic. Before I show you that though, we're going to show the labels. So labels is a way of grouping alarms together. And we have some predefined labels, but again, it's just like roles where you could create your own, give it a name, give it a color, and you now have your own custom label. To assign these labels would be based back on the subscriptions. And so we would go back to our subscriptions here. And right now I just have my range really, but if I were to edit this, I can add my label. And for now, I'm just going to put in the safety one. And then if I like, I could create other subscriptions with other labels. So it's a way of basically grouping alarms together. Maybe you want to put a label for each area. So you could have your plant area or water area or wastewater area. And you could bring them in and maybe they need to notify different people based on that. So now once we've had our labels created, which is a way of grouping alarms, and our roles created, which is a way of grouping our users, now we can go to our tactics, back in notification, tactics, advanced. And when the alarm comes in, we only really need one simple tactic in this situation. The alarm is going to first check the label. If it matches this label based on what I set in the subscription, then it will go down here and notify all my operators at once. If it doesn't match the label, it'll move on and check the next label, which is for my building, and perhaps it does match a filter that I created here, and so it would notify just me via mobile. And if it were not to match that label, then we can move on and we could check it for safety. If it does match that one, then it would notify my managers. Now, with an advanced tactic, it is start to finish. And so the way to make this re-notify or to reactivate in the escalation scenario is through the strategy. And so you can just create a simple tactic or simple advanced tactic where it checks this. And then if you want it to re-notify every 30 minutes without being acknowledged, or if it hasn't been acknowledged yet, maybe you want it to re-notify, we would do that through the strategy. And again, this requires the advanced license. And so when we go into a strategy, let's say I'm going to create a new one, we use this advanced mode button. And from there, we can pick and choose different options here. We can add more policies if we like. And I've already got one created, so I'm just going to cancel out of this for a minute and show you an option here. And so here I have my initial event. It starts my email tactic. And if the alarm would do any state change, it would re-notify. If the alarm becomes acknowledged, it will stop the strategy. If the alarm hasn't been acknowledged in 30 minutes, then it's going to start a new tactic for my mobile tactic. And if the alarm still hasn't been acknowledged yet, then it's going to do a repeating timer of 1 hour and re-notify every 1 hour. So these are a little bit different here. Upon timer, that's just the initial, from the time of the initial event. This is only going to occur one time, whereas this upon repeating timer is going to kick in every hour. Okay. And I think that'll cover the quick basic steps here. I hope that was helpful. And now we're going to move back to our slides and talk about mobile a little bit further. And Arish, not sure if you'd like me to continue or if you wanted to talk about mobile a bit.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. And so everybody, thank you very much. That was a demo of System Platform. We still have about 20 more minutes, and by the way, we'll have enough time to do Q&A. I'm sure a lot of you guys might have some questions, and we would love to give you some of those answers. But we did want to take just a couple minutes and kind of talk to you guys about the WIN-911 mobile app. The mobile app is a new notification method for us. It's a new app. And let's go to the next slide over here. So there is a couple of resources. You can go into win911.com, and then from there is all of these resources that which we'll put available. We'll do a product overview. We did a video of the basic configuration and advanced configuration, and there is obviously knowledge-based articles. How to quickly start and set it up. Gateway setup and password management, because to be able to set up, as Chris showed in the demo earlier today, there is a process to set up the gateway. Obviously, there is multiple sites set up, which is optional. So if you have multiple WIN-911s, let's say in plan A, plan B, plan C, and your operator or your technician is going to go through each one of those plans, they can have, in a single phone, they can have all of the notifications for each one of the plans. That's a multiple site setup, which we'll talk about it a little later on. Configuration of the WIN-911 mobile hub, it is optional for security purposes. So what should you expect out of WIN-911? Here is when you go into WIN-911 and the mobile app, this is what you should expect as soon as you open it up. Here is the alarm list. And as you can see, you have these different icons. You have active or not active, acknowledge or not. So as you can see, the triangle it is active but not acknowledged. And if it is a circle and a check, that means that it has been active and acknowledged. Both of them have met the requirement. If the triangle is green, is currently not active. That alarm is currently not active. And it also has not yet been acknowledged. And if it is a green circle with a check mark, the alarm has not been active, and yes, it has been acknowledged. It requires re-notify to state changes to be configured in the strategy. So that's a requirement which Chris Cave showed on his demo. Go to the next. Okay, so right over here, part of the features that we have with this mobile app is that we are able to edit the alarm details and much more. But here is an example where you can go into the settings and you're going to be able to see all of the different details about that alarm. And you can add or remove based on each one of the person that has the mobile app activated. So each person could change the amount of detail that you're going to see in the alarm without changing it on everybody's phone. So it is a personal selection. Okay, go ahead to the next one. Okay, one of the features that a lot of customers require of WIN-911 is, okay, so yes, I know that we have acknowledged, but who has seen that alarm, right? Who has acknowledged that alarm? This new WIN-911 mobile app allows you to see that. So one of the features is what we call team. When you click on team and it's inside of the alarm, you're going to be able to see which context has actually seen the alarm. And that is based on the eye. So if the eye is open, that means that that person, in this case Adam, has seen the alarm. We also have a do not disturb mode, meaning let's say in this case Bob is out on vacation, right? And he forgot to put his vacation schedule on the WIN-911 schedule. So he's currently getting pop-ups from the WIN-911 alarms. He can go inside of his app and say, do not disturb. So then you will be able to see who has in do not disturb mode. And then also there is contacts that have not seen the alarm. So if the eye is crossed, that means that that specific contact, in the case of Charles, he has not yet seen this alarm. All right, let's go to the next slide. Group chat. This is one of the best features that not only did I love, but I believe each one of you guys will love when you guys have this app. And the reason why is because now we have taken an alarm, right, into being an interactive mode. So what happens is that you normally have seen the alarm, right? Even before WIN-911, the current process was you see the alarm inside of your HMI, and you have to be in front of your HMI to be able to see that alarm. What WIN-911 did was take that alarm out, and now you can have it on your cell phone via the WIN-911 mobile app, and you're going to be able to see that alarm remotely. And now the next step was to acknowledge. So the next step to bring WIN-911 into the future was this group chat function, where it allows you to see anybody inside the group that has seen that alarm will be able to chat. So, for example, if there is a, let's say, a freshwater tank alarm, right? The pump flow is overflow, right? The group of people would be able to chat and interact. Hey, you know, this is, I am currently offside. Can somebody else take care of it? Yes, I will. So you're going to be able to interact about that specific alarm. So that is really, really nice, and that's available now on the new WIN-911 mobile app. Next slide. So now we'll talk a little bit about the WIN-911 mobile architecture. So it is very interesting. A lot of the customers were saying, hey, you know, security is a must, right? Our IT department will not allow us to have a kind of two-way communication. So what we did with this app is an outbound initiation. So meaning, let's say if we go from left to right, just like we do on our software, right? On the left, we have site A. That's your local, that's your plant, right? The very first thing that is going to happen is that you are going to sign in into the WIN-911 account. It's going to make sure that we know who you are. So it's going to touch the Azure, Microsoft Azure Active Directory, and make sure that we have the right person. Azure then will send an access token saying, yep, we've seen an alarm, we know who you are, we know who you want to send it to, we'll give you a token, goes back. That access token allows for WIN-911 to send that information to the WIN-911 mobile app, the web app. From there, that information, that alarm, cross that and then goes through your WIN-911 mobile. Now from there, WIN-911 mobile has to check and make sure that when you acknowledge, you are the right person. So it automatically signs into Azure Active Directory, make sure that your name, phone number, email address, whatever that is, all of the information that we need to have is checked, right? You'll get that access token back, and that would allow you to acknowledge all the way back to your site. So as you can see, it's very, very secure, and you're not gonna be able to ping your plant. It always is an outbound initiation process. So the alarm has to come from the plant all the way to your mobile device, then your mobile device back to the plant to acknowledge. And it has to make sure that it goes through Microsoft Azure Active Directory, one of the safety protocols available to ensure that you're going to be able to communicate. All right, next slide. This is where we talked about it, right? Earlier we said, hey, you know, you're able to do multiple sites. So in here you have WIN-911, water plant, WIN-911, wastewater plant, and WIN 911 pump station. This is a very common for the water, wastewater facilities that we have all across the United States, but around the world. So perhaps a technician would have to go through each one of these different plants. And instead of having 3 different apps, now you're going to be able to get all of the alarms, right, of all of these 3 plants from Microsoft Azure and send it all to a single app. So it doesn't matter in which plant you are, you're going to be able to figure out what alarms are for which plant. And let's say, hey, you know what? I'm in plant 2, which is a water wastewater plant, but I do not want to see the alarms for water plants and pumping station. You're going to be able to say, hey, hide these alarms until I go to that plant. So it's very easy friendly. All right, next slide. This kind of talks a little about the architecture. The way that we do this is just as we talked about before, right? From left to right, you have your plant network. And in the plant network, you have what we call the WIN-911 mobile module. That's where the module resides for the app. Now, what a lot of customers are requesting is like, we need a lot more security, right? And because of that, WIN-911 created what we call now the WIN-911 mobile hub. That piece can sit in a DMZ or a business network to create a second layer of security. From there, that information that happens, let's say the alarm from your plant network will jump into your DMZ, it will go to your mobile hub, and then it will go to the internet using Azure Cloud Services. So as you can see, you can have even more security, and this is the type of architecture that we use. Very stable, very good, and obviously, most importantly, very secure. Next slide. All right, now I'll give the remaining time to Chris Cave to talk about Grandstream.
Okay, this will be a quick one. So you may have run into an issue where Windows 10 builds 1909, 1903, and even higher broke the tappy. And there is a way to resolve it with registry settings, but they don't always work for everyone. So as a workaround and to prevent this type of issue happening again, we decided to go with Grandstream. And Grandstream is basically like a PBX, a converter or modem. We will talk to it, WIN-911 will talk to it using voice over IP, and then the Grandstream will convert that to an analog line. So you can still connect it to a POTS line and still call out to operators just like it would before with the tappy modem. Unfortunately, it's not available with our older legacy product for V7, but you can do 2 lines with it, and it does require a dedicated analog line. And you would need to be at least on WIN-911 3.19.9 or higher. Our latest version right now is 4.20.13. And here's a quick example of the technical overview. So WIN-911's voice module connects to the Grandstream on your local network using SIP voice over IP. And then once the connection is made, you can now call out through WIN-911 or even call in to WIN-911. And in an outbound call scenario, we would talk to Grandstream through the network, and then Grandstream would convert that to analog and go out your analog line out to the telephone network and to the user's phone. And then down here at the bottom is a quick example of what it looks like. So in most cases, you don't want to use it as a WAN, as a router. Instead, you want to use it as a switch, so you'd connect to the LAN. And then we would connect to the FX01 or 02 ports. And the rest is kind of self-explanatory. You could reset the factory defaults, use a SD in case maybe you wanted to record audio or something like that, and then the power. All right, so now we're going to get into some new features of 4.20.13. And the first thing we're going to mention is our exporting from log viewer. And we put a little button up here where you can export. And unfortunately, I don't have a screenshot, but I'll show you the demo later. You can always do your historical data by unchecking the auto update here. Once you do that, you're going to see a date range option. So you could pick what date range you want to see your alarms from. Once you have that, you click the export and you'll have a choice to save it as a CSV or Excel file or PDF. You can also go to the notifications tab. So in the previous slide, we were on the alarms tab. If you want to do it for notifications, we would switch to the notifications. If you wanted the current live stuff, you could just hit export. But if you wanted to see the historical data, just uncheck the box for the auto update. You'll get a date range option, and then you can select your date range, hit refresh first. I forgot to mention that earlier. You always need to hit refresh after you've set your date range, and then you could click your export and save it as a new file. It actually renames the files differently for you, so it's pretty nifty. If you're on the alarms tab, it would name the file as alarm, the date, and if you're on the notifications tab, it would name it as notifications and the date. Here's an example of what it's going to look like, and here's it's PDF, but it's open in Explorer. Or no, this is actually a PDF, so yeah. And I noticed it does sometimes cut it off if it's too wide, so you could always change the landscape mode if you want to and actually see everything in a better format if you'd like. So there's going to be some color coding, but that only shows up if it's a PDF. It won't show up as a CSV file. And then you could do some filtering and column selections if you want. All that's going to be preserved. Whoops, sorry, too quick. Another new feature we added is you can now use custom descriptions. So typically to do custom descriptions in the past, you always had to import alarms into WIN-911, and not all SCADA support that, system platform being one of them. And so now you can actually edit the page, add your alarm name, create your custom description of what you want, and your custom description, condition description. And so in my email example, I was using just simple text, and it was going to show it right here as my custom description. And so it's my custom test. It is using the condition description there, and it's coming in as active unacknowledged. And it also works for mobile. I was going to create a screenshot for you here so you can actually see that. Bear with me just a minute. So I'm going to just drag this over for a second so you can see that. Here it's showing my custom alarm, which is my tag description name, and then my custom test, which is my condition description name. Let's get that back over here. Okay. And then, yes, once you get your list built, maybe you want to export it in case, and perhaps once you have it exported, you could always change stuff around easier if you want. Maybe it's easier to change your description then, and you could hit import to import it back in. Unfortunately, you do have to do the initial, there's no way to import, export as the initial contact. Like you would have to create them first. And I know it could be tedious where you're putting in the alarm name, putting in the description name. And this is case sensitive, by the way. So if your object name is worded the way mine is worded right now, you have to make sure you put in the case sensitivity. Otherwise, it will not work. And then other features I mentioned earlier that we added a change utility, and then we also added a WIN-911 uninstaller now that will be added to the start menu. And so again, with the account change utility, if you plan on changing the username of the services, then you'd want to add it to SQL first as a sysadmin. And then once it's there, you can run the account change utility. You can select a different username, give it the password, its password, and hit submit, and it's going to change all the WIN-911 services, the app pools, to all run as a different user account. It will also let you change the password. So let's say that's you have a policy in place where you have to reset your password every 6 months. Once the password has been changed through your domain or through your Windows system, then you can come into the account change utility, put in the username, pop in a new password, submit it, and it will be good to go. And I'm going to just go back to the demo real quick here and just kind of mention, do an overview again. So I don't have many alarms in this one, but here I've unchecked my auto update. I can set my date range. Right now it's looking like it's just for today, but I'm going to see how far back I can go here. Still not much to go on, but I could go back even further. And okay, I do get a little bit more alarms that way. hit close, refresh just to make sure, although I kind of noticed it was refreshing automatically, so that was pretty neat. And then you would export, and from there you can choose which file to save it as. Again, the colors don't show up in the CSV file, so you might want to pick Excel, or maybe you want to do a PDF. And I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. And the same is true for the notifications tab. If I want to do historical data, I have to uncheck the auto update first. And it looks like it's actually refreshing on its own. I did not realize it would do that. That's pretty awesome. But just in case, I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh just to make sure. And if I were to export this data, this is what I would see. It would keep all the colors in place. And what we mentioned earlier too was about column details. So right now, these are our basic, most recent and details. You can always click the little gearbox over here, and we could select the strategy instance ID if we'd like to see what's going on there. Back on our alarms tab, I think we have a few more options. Same is true. We could hit our gearbox, and then we can choose the alarm lifetime ID, the strategy instance ID, if it's suppressed or not, and add those to the columns to build in or to bring into the reports. And one other thing I'd like to show you real quick about Log Viewer, it is our bread and butter for troubleshooting. And so I typically like to use the alarm tabs. Some people just like to keep it on the notifications tab, but let's say I'm troubleshooting something. I would go to the alarms, and perhaps say if someone didn't get a notification, or maybe they had problems acknowledging an alarm, I could go uncheck my auto update, go to about the time where the alarm came in, and then I can double click. Well, just starting from the top, from this screen first, it shows me my most recent event. Over here is the initial, shows me the strategy, what galaxy, what source, and what type of source type it is, orchestra in this case, and the condition of the alarm. And then I can double click on the alarm row somewhere. I can do this for any alarm to drill down into it. And I can see some extra details. I can see what notifications went sent out and if it was successful or not. If it said failure, it would say failure. And a lot of times you can come down here. Here I have a little scroll bar. And if it was a failure, a lot of times it would give me some sort of clue of what that failure was. Like if someone's getting a call and they're not entering their authorization code, you would actually see that in the failure log here. And then we can also see who acknowledged the alarm and what strategy it took, what tactic it did, and any state changes that might occur. And so to bring in alarms, we kind of mentioned earlier that we want to first make sure that our app platform, our WIN platform, has the option checked to enable, sorry, not that one, wrong one, the WIN platform here. And we want to make sure this is enabled here, enable InTouch as the alarm provider. And then if this was checked, if you were using this for a reason, then on our workspace, we would check that same box to make sure everything's looking good there. Once that's set, then we can go to our area. So right now my parent area is enterprise, and then I have a plant area, and this is where my test object is. And right now I have this object in object viewer. So if I were to trigger this alarm, we should see it show up in log viewer. I'm going to go hit the red arrow to get back to the main screen, turn on my auto update for live events, and here we are with our test alarm. So I can double click on that, drill down into it, and I can see, did my notification go out? It was successful. It has not been acknowledged yet. I can see what strategy this alarm triggered, and then I can see what tactic that the strategy triggered. And so right now it's just notifying one person and told me that the notification went out. If you had a basic tactic that showed delays, like maybe it notified one person, you would see a delay counter ticking, delays over, and then notifying the next person. So it steps you right through the process of what the tactic's doing. So it's really great for troubleshooting. Okay, so I did receive my mobile alarm, and I'm going to go ahead and tap into my alarm here, and we will just watch my acknowledgement tab. I'm going to acknowledge from my mobile app, and this should pop up in here. So here we can see that it actually shows me as the person who acknowledged it, and where it got acknowledged to back to the source. And so if we were to look back at my object viewer, we should now see that I'm still an alarm, and my alarm has been acknowledged. And so one thing to note, we are talking about the strategy stop condition. Notice how it disappeared from my live screen, even though my alarm's still active, but it's based on my strategy stop condition. And so right now, because I told it to stop the strategy when acknowledged, WIN-911 thinks it did its job and no longer cares, and it's now done and no longer processing, no longer using resources. However, we could always come in here and just change our strategy. And let's say I wanted to now say our stop condition is based on terminal, and we'll save that. I'm going to go ahead and turn this alarm off and on again now.
And we'll have to, after this, we'll probably have to get to Q&A as we are on the time.
No problem. And so I received my mobile alarm alert, and I'm going to go ahead and acknowledge it again. And now when I acknowledge it, it should actually show an update. It should stay in log viewer because now I have a different stop condition. So now it's telling me that it's still active and acknowledged at this point. And so my strategy is still going to process, my tactics still going to process. We're still going to keep up with this. If you had any other type of notification, re-notification set up, it would do all this. And it's not going to clear until this alarm actually goes inactive. And so if I were to set this back to false, basically the alarm clears, it's now met its stop condition when terminal. It's been acknowledged and it's returned to normal. And I think I'll close it up there, and